Because I grew up religious, and then I fought it hard, like probably a lot of teenagers. Got into drugs, alcohol, partying, and wouldn't have anything to do with standards, and just I was totally against the grain. Graduated high school, and it was like, I'm off to LA. I left home at 17, and I had no idea what I was going to do, but I was going to the big city, and I start bawling. I start literally bawling my head off. Something inside me knew that my childhood was over.
Welcome to the Eighth Gear Podcast. I'm Joe Faraci.
And I'm Cebron Walker, and we're your hosts.
Today, we're going to be interviewing Mr. Cebron Walker.
Wow, I am on the spot. Yes, let's do it.
You excited?
Not really.
Well, you should be.
Yeah. Let me give me another sip of coffee here before we get going here. Oh.
We've been talking about the Eighth Gear Podcast. You know, in the interview with myself, you mentioned that we'd been talking about this for a year. So here we are. We created the Eighth Gear Podcast.
Yeah.
And let's kind of tell the audience how this evolved into where we are at today for you.
Well, let me say this, which is sort of interesting, is that a year ago I did a branding discovery, and it's funny because I've been do marketing and PR, and I do branding for companies, and I've done the process on other people and clients, and I got talked into by my staff to do it on myself. And so I spent 4 hours doing this branding discovery, which becomes very personal. So it's like, and everybody's heard of this from Gary Vaynerchuk and other sort of gurus.
It's interesting talking about yourself, right?
It's interesting. You have to learn how to talk about yourself. It's weird, but then personal branding is such a huge subject. And I do feel that it's a very powerful tool in your business to learn how to do that and do it. And because you are the face of your brand if you are a business owner, an entrepreneur. So anyway, I did this branding discovery, and during the branding discovery, I realized I need to do this next step in my life because I've sort of come through the threshold of helping so many other people, hundreds and thousands of business owners and people, to market their businesses and grow what they're doing, at a community level, local level, regional level, national level, international level. I've worked with, individual businesses and companies of all sizes. And my next step is what this Eighth Gear Podcast is all about, is how do I help others break through entrepreneurially to have real fulfillment.
Okay, so but let me ask you this. So you're already successful doing what you're doing right now. The point of this podcast for you is to expand and extend your presence to be able to help others. Aside from, I think, the obvious in doing what it is that we do, we'll continue to amass financial success, right? But is there a higher purpose other than financially benefiting from doing this?
Yeah, well, I think it's hard to get too fulfilled or to, achieve some level of happiness if you haven't first gotten some level of monetary profitability in your life where you can, pay for a mortgage, have a house,
sure,
support your family, without like constant stress of paying the bills, right? I mean, we all, no matter how, there's some stress of paying bills and, that kind of stuff. And the economy just right now happens to be, how do we afford eggs? but you have to fight that fight to achieve a level of success where you can pay your bills and you're comfortable enough with the money piece. And then I think there's all the other pieces that have to come into play, because you can, and you see this constantly with people that are really successful, and alcohol or drugs or something else where they get lazy and then they actually turn in on themselves. And you see it all the time with people of success. And so there's, figuring out how to help yourself mentally, spiritually, with health, having some kind of sport to keep your body active. We have these bodies that if we let them fall apart, well, we're not going to be happy and fulfilled because they're going to give us pain and torture us for the rest of our lives. So we have to do all these other things to get into the 8th gear.
Let's talk about, because I think this is what needs clarification. There's guys that own $50 million companies, $100 million companies. There's billionaires in the world, and they continue to push, and they continue to be this big cause. And most people can't understand what drives these people.
They have something beyond themselves. They have to have a purpose, helping people, dealing with some bigger cause, solving some bigger problem. It has nothing to do with themselves at that point. To randomly pick out, some, obviously Elon Musk,
like what drives a guy like that?
And who know, I don't know him, but one thing you could say about him is that he's, making money is not his issue. Like, so it's almost like money comes to him because he's solving bigger problems. Like, and there's so many people that can have a lot of opinions about this guy, but like, we need to be able to get off planet if this planet gets ruined by humanity.
Yeah.
So he's going to figure out a way to get off planet. Like, that's such a bigger purpose, right? Or, so he's way beyond worrying about himself.
So, okay. How much would you agree with what I'm about to say? I got to a point where, and I think I've shared this with you, is I stopped really expanding because I got comfortable. I'm like, I'm good. I made it, right?
Yeah.
Whatever people have of this perception of making it. For myself, what I realized was laziness destroys ambition.
And something you had to, and I tell you, and I know for myself, but something entered your space and flicked a switch that you better stop that. You better handle that mental attitude. That's what wrecks like wealthy, successful people, is they get lazy and the switch doesn't get flipped and then they implode. They divorce, alcohol, drugs, some ruin wrecks it all. So
you would agree with that statement, right? Like laziness just destroys ambition.
Yeah, but it's really a generality. I had a corporate job, and then and I was making a salary, and it was easy, but then I was getting lazy, and I was like, nope. And I was like,
you knew it was wrong. It didn't feel right.
Yeah, and that was, and it was like I had a family growing, and so I told my wife, and it was like that sort of burn the boats approach of like, I've got to stop this because I know there's a bigger purpose, helping more people, helping small businesses to grow. So I'm going to quit the job. I had 2 clients, and it was like I established, weekends and nights. And I said, I can make this work, quit my job. And it was like, I had to do it.
Okay. Was that for you the defining moment? So like, ironically enough, I've been asked that question many times in my life. What was your defining moment that, took you from here to really making it? For me, it wasn't any one specific defining moment. There were several moments along with, a culmination of experiences. What was it for you along the journey where you decided, hey, I have the ability, the wherewithal to build my own company. I'm working for this company. I'm not satisfied. Was that the defining moment, or were there things that, occurred? Like, what was your thought process?
Well, I think there's a lot, but I think you have to I think reading books is really important. I mean, today we have YouTube and we're on our phones constantly, but I think it's really important to put those down sometimes and just read books, because I think that gets you in a mental space where you're able to really process it. When you're watching a video and stuff, I think that's a good way to get ideas. But when you read a book, it gives you space to process information. And so I read 4 Hour Work Week, and that that really lit a fire under me, and then went down that path, grew Walker Creative, and then you have another stage of getting a little lazy because you're making money now. And then it was like, I've got to spiritually take a look at myself and improve myself, because you need to keep making levels. It's almost like we talk about the 8th gear podcast. So it's like you maybe go into 4th gear and then you get stuck in 4th gear. But if you're continuously reading books, and then you have to have the ability.
Because 4th gear is fast enough, right?
4th gear could be pretty good, right? But you have to have the insight and the ability to self-reflect. If you and that honesty with yourself to then go, good, I'm stuck in 4th gear, and this is not easy. But I self-reflected. I was reading books. I think I actually read Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Okay.
And I know you have that book on your shelf too, because you do real estate. Yeah. But and so I don't do real estate as like my wife does it, but that book is very applicable no matter what you do. And so I was in 4th gear. That was a book that just comes to mind immediately that I read, and it was like, good, I gotta. Funny how is then, okay, good. So if I can make some more money, then I could give that money to my wife and we could start buying property. And then we started buying property, and so I think, if you listen to people that are wealthy, it's like you have to have cash flow, you have to have several streams of income, but you also have a portfolio where you're investing in different places. You can't put everything in one basket. And so then we started buying property. So I was like, let's say in 5th gear, kept reading, and then investing in myself spiritually so that I could expand myself. And so then I go and, and then you can move up the gears if you have the ability to self-reflect.
Okay.
And anytime you feel yourself getting lazy, and this is for myself, that's the time to really self-reflect and go, I got to set a bigger goal. I got to what's the big next step? Because that's more fulfilling too.
How do you get past, like for me, I got really comfortable in life. I had already created intergenerational wealth. I knew that my kids, as long as I taught them responsibility with good, solid ethics and just a general good upbringing, my mindset was they can take what I've built and continue to expand. Because, I mean, how many families do we know where it's the businesses are left to the children and they not only completely squander it, but sort of self-destruct, right? So, I got comfortable and I thought, well, there's really no need to go beyond this. Let me just kind of go play tennis all day and just enjoy what I thought was enjoying life.
Yeah. I think a really neat game to play is, if you want the next big thing, whether it's a boat, a sports car, a bigger house, then go get more clients, go sell more stuff, go make the money, and then do it. So it's like,
So are you setting goals? Are you writing down?
Yeah,
how many clients do I need to get in order to?
Like, I know when I was at 20, I had 25 clients on retainer, and we had a nice house in California, and we were like, but we want the kids to go to private school, and then we were looking at moving to Florida. Okay, good. Like, I can't be lazy. I got to get to 35 clients on retainer, and it was like I had to sell hard. I had to get there. And then we moved to Florida. Then it was like, okay, we decided in Florida, you're either doing golf or tennis, and we want to do tennis. It costs money to go to a tennis club, and I know these are very maybe silly.
Thank God, by the way, because if you were into golf and not tennis, I mean, we wouldn't be hanging out.
No, and so all these things take money, and so individually, you got to go, good, set goals, keep pressure on yourself. I feel strongly is like, pressure is important. You have to constantly have the ability to create internal pressure to take the next target.
So speak to that though, because there are many elite athletes that say pressure is a privilege, right? What are your thoughts on that?
The elite athletes, I mean, and I'm not one, but at that level, yes, sir, there's the benefit of being at the top. There's all the bells and whistles that go along with being at the top. So, you got to be able to take the pressure. And presidents, big business, there's massive pressure at that level. They get limousine around or they look like celebrities, but make no mistake, the pressure to be at that level is insane. It's insane.
No question. No question. Would you agree that most people are maybe disheartened or unwilling to reach the next gear because there are so many challenging factors, pressure being one of them, and most people just don't have the ability to confront that?
Well, it's also individual what you want, because it might be a farmhouse in the country and you want your plot of land and you want some animals and you want to live that kind of lifestyle, which is wonderful. I mean, I know people that do that and live out in Tennessee and have or it was Kentucky. I think we have friends that moved to Kentucky, and it's beautiful, and it's just a different goal and it's totally fine. So it's just a matter of, and in their own way, they have their own goals and targets and their own pressure for sure to live that life, but it's just different for everybody.
You do marketing.
Yeah.
You're the marketing expert. Anyone who wants to be successful in any aspect of business
needs marketing, correct?
What do they do?
Well, I would say there's probably five things, and there's very tactical, but you gotta create attention. It's a game of attention. Whoever has the most attention wins, and especially in tight economies like or crazy economies that we're in right now, some business owners might go, well, we need to pull our flippers in, cut our marketing expenses, be careful. And that those guys are going to lose. And then the companies that are going, this is the time to actually thrive and go for it, because they're going to take market share. There's a great example of Post versus Kellogg's, the cereal companies in the 30s during the Depression, and Post economized and pulled their flippers in and stopped spending money. Kellogg's said, then this is our chance. We're going to crush them. And Kellogg's doubled down on their marketing, and they owned the cereal market and then every other part of the food market for 80 years after that. So, the companies right now that double down on their marketing, get their branding right, and go for it are going to be the guys getting market share. And so you have to always go after attention. And there's so many tactics to that, of course, but that's.
So you're saying don't retract.
No.
The complete opposite.
Right now is the moment to go hardcore on marketing, because a lot of your competitors are worried and cutting back on marketing expense. And this is where you're going to win. It's a great time. When the stock market's down is the time to go.
Okay. I totally agree with what you're saying. It's usually going against the current. Right?
Oh, 100%.
Okay. You are at this point in your life very successful. Did you know that this is what life was going to look like for you in your younger days?
Not a chance. I remember I left home at 17 in a little Volkswagen, and I was driving south in California, from Northern California to Southern California, listening to Led Zeppelin, no shirt on, and no care in the world. And I had no idea what I was going to do, but I was going to the big city, and I was driving through the Grapevine, and Led Zeppelin, there's a song, I don't remember the name of the song, but like Over the Hills and Into the Valley or something is the words, right? Robert Plant is singing. And I start bawling. I start literally bawling my head off while I'm in the car driving with all the windows down, this superheated air of, the Southern California in the middle of summer, and 17. And it was like something inside me knew that my childhood was over. And it's weird because I grew up religious and then I fought it. Like I fought it hard, like probably a lot of teenagers got into drugs, alcohol, partying, and wouldn't have anything to do with like standards and just I was totally, against it, against the grain. And then graduated high school and it was like, I'm off to LA. Like it snapped. I was like,
Just like that, it flipped the script.
well, I'm driving and this song hits me and I'm like, and all I was wearing is shorts and flip-flops driving. And this, I started bawling and it was like something snapped that my childhood was over and that the irresponsibility, and I don't know, maybe 17 is young for that realization to occur, but my greater need on this earth was starting. Whatever the next phase of my life, I didn't know what it was, but that sort of self-reflection of that moment was like, the childhood is behind me now. I have to become an adult, and there was no one with me. It was this solo experience.
So that was self-realization. It wasn't like enforced. It wasn't someone said, "Hey, time to wake up."
Yeah,
here's
totally self-realized. The partying ended, the drugs ended, the indulgence like that ended. It was, I didn't need, it was like, that wasn't going to be part of my life anymore. And it was, I learned communications, I learned marketing, I learned PR, I studied hard at that point, and life began, and I didn't know the trajectory.
Sure.
I worked all over. I led, in Hollywood and author tours and all aspects of things. But, that's when you're just building that experience. And I did so many things. And all of it very exciting.
Any regrets?
100% no. Like, I feel so blessed it's almost like you come for full circle, because then eventually later down the road, I found spirituality again. And in the times when I needed it, used it to self-reflect, and then took next steps and went from 4th gear to 5th gear to 6th gear. And, just using that as a metaphor, you have to do that in stages of your life.
I had to ask you that question because the very first time I was asked the question of, do you have any regrets? It was at a seminar that I was giving in New York City in front of a large audience. And at the time, I think I was in my late 20s. Towards the end of the session, we would always allow personal questions. One guy stood up and just looked at me and said, "All right, man, so what are the regrets you have in life?" And I'm like, I was sort of caught off guard. I wasn't necessarily expecting that as a personal question. I said, regrets. I don't have any regrets. And he goes, bullshit, man. You got regrets. Everyone's got regrets. Everyone's made mistakes, man. You got to have regrets. And I'm like, nah, I don't really have any regrets. How could you not have regrets? And my response, my instinctual response was, well, if I regret anything, then I wouldn't be who I am. All my experiences, good or bad, have helped define and shape who I am. So why would I regret that? But this guy was very insistent, to the point where I said, okay, listen. So I responded to it. And I guess if there is going to be a regret, I just wish I had done more of what I was already doing, right? Just on a larger scale. But like in that moment, it definitely was an epiphany, for me, in the sense that I'm like, man, I could be doing this on a larger scale. Why am I not? But I have found that in speaking to and being surrounded by very successful people, interesting when you ask that question, do you have regrets? And most of them respond by saying, no, it wouldn't have led me to where I am and to my realization and to my awareness. So it's kind of interesting that you
Yeah, well, I mean,
that you say the
you
same
have
thing.
failures and negative whatever experiences, but they're not something to necessarily regret because I think we've all been through them. But I think that I think it's a positive thing that like in your example you're using, because I think it's sometimes good to have someone get in your face and force you to look, because
Yeah.
that's pressure, and I think that we get lazy when we don't have pressure, and so sometimes it's always nice to have someone else kick your ass and put in that pressure if
For as
you're
much as
not
we don't want
doing
it.
it. Like, and of course we hate it if our wives are the ones doing it. but I would recommend if you self-reflect and you realize that you're like being a little bit lazy, it's go find a mentor to kick your ass. Go find someone that maybe is a third party that not related to you, a coach or something, because you have to take it to the next level, that you're stuck in a gear.
Yeah.
And at the moment you've had that realization, you better take action to get yourself out of that gear, because that's the moment for growth.
So, okay, you bring up a really good point, right? Which is coaches and mentors. I'm not aware of anyone who's had massive success who hasn't had a coach or a mentor. You could think of, multi-billionaires, right?
Yeah.
They do have, it's behind the scenes, but they do have a coach. They do have a mentor. I certainly can say that I've had my mentors, my coaches. So I know you had to have had, because there's no way anyone reaches any level of success without a good coach and a good mentor. So my question to you is, who is that coach and mentor for you? And what would you recommend for, anyone listening and just wanting to get into the game, wanting to like alter and starting to build, business? Like what do they do? Where do they go?
I'd have to say that my father, fathers are interesting, because I think with sons and fathers, there's almost a subconscious competition, love-hate relationship.
I got it.
You have a love-hate relationship with your father because, like I looked at him, he was really successful in business, and I watched his business principles, and I learned things like get clients on retainers, serve your clients as best you can long-term. And that's a game-changing as a business owner. If you have to work every single week to sell more product, there's models for it, but that's stressful. And so I learned a business model from my father that I've applied to this day. But there's also a competition. There's
okay, but not everyone has or has been as fortunate as we've been, because I've definitely I've definitely stated that my father was extremely impactful on my life, right? Very supportive, very encouraging, definitely taught me some essential principles in business. You're saying the same thing. And unfortunately, not everyone has, comes from that environment. So for someone that who may not have grown up with an encouraging, supportive father, how do you find a mentor? How do you find a coach?
I mean, because my father was 100% encouraging. So, and
I know your dad, and funny, I would totally agree.
Yeah, and it's sort of funny because that's where the competition comes from. Because how do you do better? Because it's so hard, because he has helped, tens of thousands of people to improve their lives and grow their businesses and everything. So, it's always a bar that I have to keep fighting. I keep trying to reach, right?
Yeah.
But you can read books. I read books, but to find a person you can have conversations with as a mentor, I've met so many great successful businessmen that I've learned things from. You've got to find that person that you can learn from, that create a relationship where there's an agreement that, you're going to get mentorship from this person, some business owner, someone who is going to invest some time with you to take yourself to the next level. You've got to take yourself as soon as you've realized you're stuck, you've got to move, because that's something that's a self-reflection point that's not necessarily common.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I would say that for me, what I have found is when someone has a desire and willingness, they will spot who they want to work with and make every effort possible to commit to getting that guidance, coaching, and mentorship. At least that's what I've seen. When someone's hungry, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, attach yourself to someone.
Some fast lightning questions for you. Favorite book?
Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Workweek was probably a game changer, a big one. I think it's that one, because it made me look at the way to organize your life and strip out, be efficient, effective, strip out waste, use your time wisely. There's so many nuggets in there that can change the way you approach everything. I read it 10 years ago, and I've applied pieces from that the whole time.
Favorite movie?
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
That's the first thing. I watched that when I was a child and 7 years old in 1977. I'm 54 now. I think I loved that movie because it's like we're not alone. It's like a massive universe out there, and we have to be heroes. It gave me that like, I want to be the hero. I want to be like Luke Skywalker. And of course, my last name is Walker. So I immediately asked my father if we're related.
That's awesome.
The hero mentality came from that movie.
Favorite pastime, hobby? I know you're a huge comic buff.
Yeah, I love comic books and baseball cards. I did it as a 12-year-old. I sort of got my feet wet buying comic books and cards. Put it away when I started getting in, I grew up and got distracted in high school, of course. And then I went into the business world, and 10 years ago, now maybe 8 years ago, went home for Christmas and pulled all these boxes out of the closet. And it was like, my mom wanted to just get rid of all this crap. And I was like, these are awesome. And I had saved a lot of them, like in good condition. And this entire hobby re-emerged for me. And I think the collectibles world today is exploding. Such a neat thing. And a lot of people are getting into it. I go to comic conventions and stuff. Yeah, I love comics and cards.
And I got to tell you, I love the fact that you call my kids when these conventions are being put on.
Yeah.
Inviting them, and they love it. They get excited. They're like, yes.
Now your kid is now doing eBay stuff.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
totally getting into flipping on eBay.
Yeah. He's turned he's definitely turned that into
it's
a business,
an entrepreneurship right there.
Yeah.
And it is legit. Like, you can actually have a business that way. And
Very cool. Well, I got to tell you, I'm really excited that we're launching this show. It's taken some time to finally put all the pieces together. I think we're going to have some amazing guests. There's definitely going to be a lot of education. You talk about mentors and coaches right here, right on the eighth gear.
The whole idea, I think, like, we're going to share our own experience, but to bring on people that are going to give their life experiences and of what has changed the game for them, I think this is the way to go, because we all can learn from each other and bring on people that, maybe it's going to spark something for you. So this is very cool.
I love it. That's it for today's 8th Gear podcast. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe to our podcast, and turn on notifications for future episodes.